Hello, everybody. So I hope everybody's doing good this week. Hello, Flo, dropping teeth in the chat. Hello, Blind Bard. So this week, I wanted to talk about self-love. More teeth from Flo. This week, well, first of all, let's start off by asking if anybody wants to put in the chat anything they want to talk about. But yeah, the topic I wanted to tackle at some point today is how to love ourselves. I wanted to talk about self-love this week because there is a day approaching that some people love and some people absolutely hate. And it is about love. Valentine's Day, obviously, is what I'm talking about. I don't know, I hear self-love is frowned upon in the Bible. But I think self-love is something that should be more celebrated on Valentine's Day rather than celebrating love with other people, because it can be very beautiful and wonderful to be able to love yourself, and it's very important to love yourself and take care of yourself. And taking care of ourselves and loving ourselves makes us much better at being good partners to the people that we do end up loving and dating. Excuse me, sipping my coffee. Yeah, that's why most holidays in general, I think, tend to have this split where, the holiday tends to be about being with family and loved ones. And a lot of holidays have a focus on that. And I think we need to bring more attention to taking care of ourselves in that time. So I think I talked about that on some of the streams around Christmas time, about how Christmas and Hanukkah and all those holidays can end up being really difficult for people because sometimes it's the first time you're celebrating it since somebody passed away, or somebody's no longer in your life, and sometimes it's you don't have people that you can share it with. And thank you for the follow, unnamed wrecker. So sometimes it can be like a variety of things that make a holiday difficult for someone to get through. And Valentine's Day can be especially difficult for people because, it's not just family and stuff, right? There's a huge focus on romantic partnerships, and that can make people feel like absolute shit. And that's why focusing on yourself for Valentine's Day, I think, can be great. I know some TV shows and stuff have done the whole Galentine's Day and stuff like that, where you meet up with friends and celebrate how much you love your friends, and that's pretty cool too. But as someone who had struggled in the past with being able to just be comfortable as an individual and not involve people in my own happiness, I think not even Palentine's Day. Yeah. I think it can be very important to be able to learn to just be comfortable with yourself. And it's not necessarily being comfortable being alone or whatever. It's comfortable, it's finding this comfort in being alone. It's being able to be your own friend and be there for yourself and be happy to an extent with that. So, especially with how we're kind of like trained from a young age to think about what other people think and to um, focus on, you know, we're also trained that we're only important or whatever if we have another person that cares about us and shows that they care about us. And that other person can be you. It doesn't have to be an other person. It can be you. You can be the one that finds worth in yourself. Um, Blind Bard, spending the day meditating and being introspective seems worthwhile. Yeah, that's a good way to spend the day, just meditating and being there with yourself. Also, people underestimate, like, you can take yourself on a date. Take yourself on a date. Think of a perfect afternoon that you would love to give to somebody, like making dinner and watching a movie and, um, you know, trying to think, having a nice bath and things like that, and do it for yourself. Take yourself on that date. Show yourself that love. And obviously, there's certain things that work better with another person, but in general, like planning dates for yourself can feel really good. Because it's not just about, like, oh, I'm going to have a day that I, do some games or whatever. No, like it's an intentional taking yourself on a date. It's an intentional making yourself feel good. Um, Showing yourself love, showing yourself that you care about you. Um, Instead of just, there's, we talk a lot about creating safe spaces and using distractions and stuff like that to help us get through hard times. And it's more than that when you take yourself on a date. You're allowing yourself to get to be loved by you. And it can be kind of difficult figuring out the difference, but with practice, you can figure it out. Like I said, that was something that I struggled with. I needed to reflect in the past on what made me feel worthwhile. So, not just what makes you feel good, but what makes you feel worthwhile. And a lot of people tend to answer, and I also was bad for answering. It makes me feel worthwhile when someone else loves me. It makes me feel worthwhile when someone else wants to be with me, when someone else thinks I'm worthwhile. And that's not a healthy way of thinking. And part of why it's important for us to learn to love ourselves and us to learn to treat ourselves with that love is because if we go into relationships or are in relationships and we're not loving ourselves in that way, we're putting all of that pressure on them. So then they're going to have expectations we have of them in the relationship, right? So we're going to need a lot more from them and might not be able to provide them as much either because we are so focused on what we need and are asking a lot of somebody when it's stuff that we need to also be providing ourselves. That said, it's not the same as like going into a relationship and having the person completely neglect your needs. And like that is a problem. But going in and you already love yourself and you're feeling comfortable being with yourself means that you can show up even better and you don't need as much from the other person, and it gives them more space and it allows you to connect with them more. You still love yourself before your latest relationship. That's another thing is being with someone for a while, especially when a relationship begins, right? You have the honeymoon phase or whatever, where everything is so new and it feels so amazing. And then over time, you start to kind of disconnect. And that's how pretty much every relationship works is you're going to start to get this disconnect. And the healthy, long lasting ones are the ones where as the change happens and the disconnects start to happen, you communicate and you make effort on both parts to make sure that you're still connecting in new, interesting, awesome ways and still making each other feel good. And it takes hard work. Relationships are hard work. So some people, you might not get past most relationships. You're not going to get very far past the honeymoon phase because, once all the fun is had and you have to actually put work into continuing this relationship, it means both sides need to contribute just as much, and both sides need to be interested in actually keeping this relationship healthy and long lasting. And often somebody falls into a rut of comfort where they feel like they don't need to, or they don't really want to put in that effort, whether it's conscious or not. And that's how it ends up failing. Yeah, you wanted to be friends and lovers for an entire year before you decided to officially start dating because you wanted to avoid the honeymoon phase. From experience, I can say that it, and as you have figured out, it doesn't work. I have had relationships where I've literally waited over a decade of being a friend and lover with somebody before actually getting into a relationship, and it still had the honeymoon phase. And it's possible to bring those kinds of feelings back to an extent, but you're never going to get the full, your relationship equivalent of chasing the dragon with that, right? That's one thing I love about being poly, though, is we get to have the honeymoon phase with new partners and meet new people and grow. And your partnerships are always going to switch out, and you're going to have some relationships that last a long time, some that are shorter, but you get to have fun and you get to learn from that person and discover new things about yourself. And go through that honeymoon phase, and then when it ends you can move on from there and make space for the next experience. But yeah, we were talking about, you mentioned that the relationship that you were in, you went from loving yourself to not being able to an extent. And I think a lot of that does come from when we get comfortable in a relationship. We go through the honeymoon phase, we feel loved, and we stop giving ourselves that self love because we're getting it from somebody. We're getting that from this new person or whatever. And so we end up not doing what we used to for ourselves. And it does take practice. It takes constant practice to remember that we matter and we have worth separate from people. And you can easily fall into a habit of needing that from the other person. And it's just going to be getting back into practice. And hello, unnamed record. Thank you for joining us. We are just talking about self-love. So, yeah, it might be that you just need to get back into practice of taking care of yourself and thinking of yourself and loving yourself. Maybe, like I said, taking yourself on your own little dates. And I think one way that helped me take care of myself was reminding myself I needed to be kind to myself. And I need to treat myself with the same respect and love that I would give to a friend. So I needed to treat myself like a best friend. So, self-love is also difficult when you were raised to never feel good enough. Yeah, that's the thing, is like a lot of us are conditioned. We're raised to really care about what other people think of us and put all our worth in the worth other people find in us. And then a lot of us unfortunately grow up with the being taught that we're not good enough, and we have to make people care about us because we're not good enough. So if somebody doesn't care about us or somebody doesn't want to be with us, then we're worthless because we're not good enough. So it's reminding yourself, and that's where the being your own best friend can help out. Is that you need to remind yourself, like I would think, if I'm sitting there thinking negative thoughts about myself, then I will take a second and be like, would I say this to a friend? Would I, like, if a friend was feeling these feelings of worthlessness and telling themselves these things, would I agree with them? No, I wouldn't. I would remind them that they have worth outside of what other people think of them. And I would help remind them of those things. So you can be supportive of yourself in that way. And again, it comes back to the lists that I talk about a lot. Making lists of things. You can make lists of the things that you have done that you're proud of. And make sure, again, that you're in a good headspace when you make the lists. Don't try and make lists when you're already going through a hard time. The lists are supposed to be something that you already have, that you wrote when you weren't feeling so bad, because we have trouble thinking of the positive things when we're feeling bad. So make lists of stuff you're proud of, make lists of achievements, make lists of things you love about yourself, and leave yourself those lists so that when you're not feeling good, you can give yourself that self-love by pulling out those lists and going, you know what? Yeah, I did this thing that was really amazing and I was really proud of myself. And even if you look at it and go, you know what? That wasn't a big deal. I didn't achieve that much by doing that. You wrote that on that list. You were proud of that when you weren't feeling so bad. So maybe it's time for you to look at that and think, no, wait, I was proud of that. And there's moments when I feel really happy that I did this or that this is part of me. There's times when I really love this side of myself. And right now is just like a really hard time for me in this moment. Uh, uh, just go no self, Debbie. Hello, Butterbee. Yeah, our parents and our early family can be some of our biggest haters, and really impact how we see ourselves in the future. Some of the things my family made me feel was that I just kind of existed for whatever person I was with, and which was an interesting thing considering that, like, my mom was a feminist and stuff and still managed to teach this unhealthy thing of, I would exist for whatever partner I had, and my worth comes from what I could provide that partner. But I think it's because she went through similar, like, self-worth issues. I really feel like I struggle expressing myself because I'm scared of what other people will think of me. Yeah, that's something I struggled with a lot too. This fear of, well, if I do or say what I actually want to do or say, if I'm really me, then people won't like me for me. And I mean, one of the healthy ways to think about that is that you don't want people in your life you can't be yourself around. And I know that's a lot easier said than done, or followed through with, because that does limit the people in your life. And again, we're taught that, like, you need to be popular, you need to have lots of people that, absolutely love you. And the reality is, um, people who have like 50 friends don't actually have 50 friends. They have 50 people that they're loosely attached to and that like certain aspects of them. They're not people that like all of them. They like parts of that person. And that person is probably having to mask a lot of who they are, and not get to truly express themselves in order to have these 50 friends, There's a study, I have to look it up again, but there was something that showed that the average adult can only have like really good connections with like 5 to 10 people or something like that. And we need to remind ourselves that, it's having the small community, the small group of friends that like really connect with us, is much better than having a large group of people who don't really know us and we can't really be comfortable with. It can be better to have one friend than, amuse a whole room. And again, that's easier said than done because you might not even have the one. I'd be super duper happy with just one friend who can be myself with. Yeah. And being yourself helps you find that friend. So you have to remind yourself of that too, is if you're masking, if you're hiding who you are, then the person who's going to really love you for who you are can't see who you are. So how are they supposed to love you for that? And how are you going to find them? So being who you need to be and embracing that unapologetically and like allowing yourself to not mask all the time is going to open up your life to be able to find these people that really enjoy you for who you are and really want to be around you, and really make you feel comfortable. So that's something to keep in mind. And that doesn't mean there won't be rough times. There's going to be times where, you are yourself and feel rejected because then people are going to not want you around because they don't like you or whatever. And that's unfortunately part of life is, not everybody's going to get along with everybody. But then that's not really people you want in your life, right? And you just got to hold on because that's opening space for the people you want in your life. And that's where the self-love comes in again, is during the times when you don't have these people and you're waiting for these people to find you, you need to be the one giving yourself that care. And there are people who, well, I have had many people try and bring up, well, I can't love myself. That is not true. That is 100% not true. It's that you've had difficulty figuring out how to do that right now. And I speak from experience. Everybody is capable of loving themselves, and it may take a lot of work, a lot of practice, and a lot of figuring out what works for you. But you can love yourself, and it is necessary in order for you to be healthy and build healthy relationships with other people even. So, maybe the taking yourself on a self date doesn't work, but then try something else. I always thought mantras didn't work very well, but with mantras, I realized that the whole key is repeating them, even if you don't believe them, and making yourself believe them. Looking at what the reality of it is. I'd get so annoyed when I started with mantras, saying nice things to myself in the mirror or whatever, and be like, this is so stupid. I hate this. But then after you say it enough, and again, pick a mantra that like actually works for you, not some generic mantra you hate, it can start to help. And that combined with other things can really make a difference. My drug addiction alienated pretty much all of my close friends, and I want to mend those connections. Um, and oh, thank you, Butterbee, for saying I'm giving good advice. um, yeah, so that's another thing is on the topic of self-love, talking about the addiction and alienating people, you need to forgive yourself for making that mistake. And if you made mistakes that alienated friends or loved ones in the past, if you want to make the effort to fix those relationships, you can make that effort, but also take into consideration that they might not want to repair that. And it's really hard to accept that, you might have destroyed relationships with toxic behavior that you had in the past. And even though you're a better person now and you're doing so much work and you feel like you're completely different now and you've learned from what you did, those people might not want to reconnect. And that's a boundary for them. And the thing is, in our lives, people are going to come and go. Something that I have realized and had to come to terms with is, you see people who have friendships that last decades and stuff like that. And that's great. That's lovely. But most people are going to have people come in and out of their lives because we all change. We all grow and change. And that means that friendships or romantic relationships over time, you essentially change into different people. And that means that you can grow apart, and that's okay. That's part of life. And just because we grow apart doesn't mean that the lovely moments and memories we have with those people from earlier, it doesn't mean that those are any less good. It doesn't mean that your friendship that you had with them when you had those good times wasn't worth it or anything like that. It was part of your life, and now you're on to a new era. It's a new chapter. I wouldn't even say a new chapter, really. It's a whole new book. It's something brand new that, you're going to have new friends. You're going to, I believe in chosen families, so you're going to have new family and stuff too. And it hurts that we have to let go of people, but it's all part of life. We have to let go of people because we change. We have to let go of people because people pass away. And we need to allow ourselves to grieve that and allow ourselves to grow and continue and move on to our new things. Someone told me once that we are the sum of the people we met in our lives, so I like to think of the positives to keep those parts in me. Yeah, so that's the thing is, I have had people in my life who have really changed who I am, and added to who I am, I should say, rather. Like, people have shown me things that I really enjoyed or taught me things about myself. And therefore, like, who I am today is completely different because of those people. And even some of those people who have completely made me who I am today ended up being toxic and people that I had to cut out of my life. Doesn't mean that the things that they gave me that changed who I am are any less valuable. And it doesn't mean that the nice moments I had with them were worthless or something I need to forget. Those were valuable parts of my life and valuable parts of me. And that's fine if I need to remove those people from my life. My mother being one of my main examples is I probably bring up my mom in my everyday life literally every day because she had a lot of positive impact on my life. And she taught me a lot of amazing things. She introduced me to a lot of amazing things. And she got me into horror and supported like my love of scary things. She, despite being homophobic, she was the one that actually introduced me to a lot of queer culture and stuff like that. Um, like, I mean, I was voguing in my living room when I was like 6, and it was because my mom introduced me to that culture. Um, so even though there was a lot of issues with my relationship with her, and it ended up being something that I needed to cut contact, go no contact with her, because of the toxic relationship. That did not mean that the like really fun moments I had with her, like exploring um, new places when we would like go on little road trips, or the awesome things she taught me about activism because she was an activist and stuff like that, that doesn't lessen any of that. All of that is very important, and all of that makes me who I am today. But I needed to move on, and in order for my life to be comfortable, in order for me to be able to take care of myself, I needed to realize that that relationship needed to come to an end. Um, Especially since I tried to do things to uh, keep the relationship with my mom healthy, and she did not. And that's the main thing, is I put the effort in, and she did not. So that was something that needed to end so that I could be healthy. And cutting ties with people that are close to you like that, whether it's a family member, a friend, a lover, a partner. Again, going back to self love, loving yourself is what's going to get you through that. Yes, your support network also, which is also important as best as you can have one. But I mean, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, I mentioned building community is important, but sometimes community fails you. And that's why you need to make your own safe spaces. And that's what I mean by like, you need to be able to be there for yourself. You need to be able to take care of yourself. You need to be able to feel love from yourself so that when, like, well, rather, if eventually you hit a point where you don't have that community, you don't have your safety net, and you need to find support, you can find that from yourself. And it is very difficult. And it can lack the fulfillment that you get from others, but you can create those feelings by accepting yourself and loving yourself and treating yourself with that same kindness that you would give to a friend, like I said. I have to be careful though. I tend to suffer from hyper independence tendencies, like to toxic degrees. Yeah. There is a difference between loving yourself and isolating yourself too. Um, but it takes a lot of reflection. Um, if you're able to be comfortable with just independence, um, then it's learning to incorporate others in a healthy way, because you also shouldn't be pushing yourself beyond what you're comfortable with. And I think that just takes a lot of reflecting on what you need. So reflecting on, you haven't been social. I don't go out and stuff like that with people. Um I'm trying to recall the last time I actually went out with people. I went to a party for Halloween that I absolutely hated going to and regrettably going to. Um, I went to that 3 years ago, and I think that might have been the last time I went out. Other than that, I just talk to people online because I have more control over that. Um, Also, because of my disabilities, it makes it difficult for me to actually go out and do things. So I find a lot of my connections online with people. Um, it's safer for me physically, it's easier for me mentally, and I still manage to get what I need that way from, socializing and everything like that. And I try to pay attention to make sure I'm not isolating myself too much, because I've done that too. I still am kind of doing that, and but part of it is I'll sit and reflect on, am I not talking to my friends because I don't have the spoons and I need to focus on myself right now, or am I isolating myself? And that might be something to meditate on, or if you have a psychiatrist that you see or something like that, discuss that with them. Or if you have a friend that you feel very close with and that you feel comfortable kind of like talking through those things with, you can talk to them and be like, well, this is how I've been isolating, how I think I've been isolating. And I don't know if I'm actually isolating or if I'm just taking care of myself at this point. It can be very difficult to figure those things out on your own, but not impossible. If you don't, excuse me, if you don't have a professional or a friend that you feel like you can talk that through with, who would completely understand. And that doesn't mean like you don't have like a best friend that like you're super comfortable with. Like it might just be that, just logically they can't really understand your perspective. And it's about finding ways to sort that out for yourself. Maybe keeping journals and reflecting on them. Um, I like things like CBT and DBT, taking that into account to help think through your actions and your thoughts so that you can have a more, uh, like a view that isn't biased because of what you are going through. And I'm a big believer in taking time with it too. So if you think, hey, I think I'm being hyper independent. I think I am not asking for help when I need it. I think I'm isolating myself. Then write down the instances that you think are showing that, and maybe write down, this is, why it would be better for me to involve people in this. And this is why it's not. So realizing when you're separating yourself from people out of fear of abandonment or out of fear of being hurt, and not out of just necessity because your mental health in that moment. You might need to call yourself out on those things. And parties are awkward and overwhelming for introverts, anyways. Yeah, I don't do so good at parties. I used to actually throw parties a lot and really enjoyed throwing the parties, but I also didn't actually participate in them that much. I did a lot of like cooking for the parties and then doing my own thing. Only ever been to kink parties. Well, regular parties are overrated in my opinion. I always found that the regular parties would be like very heavy on social expectations, like your kind of average social expectations. And depending, obviously, on the people throwing them and the people there, um, weren't very neurodivergent friendly. Butterby, I've been to one party in my life and it was kind of fun while my friend was there. Yeah, that's the thing for me at least, and I'm sure for a lot of you. Um, when you go to a party, if you usually have a friend there that you kind of rely on to connect with during the party. And then you can step out from them and socialize and find other people. But then you have that one friend that's like your anchor to go back to so that you don't feel so awkward. Um, and so that you feel like you're not alone. My mistake at my last party that I went to was I went because it was a friend of mine that was throwing the party, and they really wanted me to show up. And the problem was, I had never met any of their friends. I had, well, that's a lie. I met one of their friends before. I knew one of their friends, and I knew their wife, kind of. And the problem was, the friends that I knew were supposed to come and didn't show up. So the only person I knew there was the person who was hosting the party. And that is a bad time because the host is going to be, you know, having to talk to everybody. So they're not somebody that you can kind of like cling to for the entire party. So I spent some of it trying to socialize, but there was also a big disconnect between me and the other people there. So socializing did not go well. And then I ended up having to, when I got home after that, kind of having to take a mental health break because it bothered me. And I had to remind myself that I had people that cared about me and that I thought I was pretty damn great. Again, the self-love that we're talking about. Because the party left me drained and left me feeling pretty shitty. Oh, and another part of self-love, because we talk about like actually loving yourself, which is a huge part of it. You know, taking yourself on the dates, making sure that you're making lists of things that you actually like about yourself, reminding yourself that you love yourself through mantras that are very specific. Don't do this bullshit grabbing the crappy mantras that you don't actually like out of a random list on the internet and then trying it when it's not going to work for you. You need to pick the mantras that are specific to you, that can help you. But on top of that, part of self-love is boundaries. And that is self-love that involves other people too, because you need to set actual boundaries for yourself. And boundaries include a lot of things. Boundaries include how people can talk to you, how you allow people to talk to you, the things they allow to do, you allow them to do around you. And it can be very hard to set these boundaries with other people. And it's a type of self-love that you need to do when you're involving other people in your life. That includes recognizing when someone is ignoring your boundaries, calling them out on it, and not accepting any excuses. If you are setting boundaries, if you are letting somebody know that something is making you uncomfortable, and their response is to argue why it's your fault or argue why it doesn't matter, that is a huge red flag. And if they're not willing to accept accountability for that, then there's someone that you should maybe reflect on if you should have them in your life, or at the very least, how much time you spend with them in your life. There's a lot of people have problems receiving criticism, and a lot of people are scared to give criticism because of the negative responses that can come from giving it. And telling someone a boundary and then telling them that they've overstepped that boundary is a criticism. It's a criticism of how they're teaching or how they've been treating you, right? So But if you find yourself being the one that someone says a boundary and your reaction, your immediate feeling is like, I'm going to be negative about this. And it's not a conscious decision, but, someone sets a boundary or says you're overstepping a boundary and you're like, I'm not doing that. Or I don't feel like that's a big problem. Or, I never meant for you to feel that way. So it doesn't matter that I overstepped this because that wasn't my intention. You need to take a second and realize that when someone is saying you're overstepping a boundary, they are feeling vulnerable and they felt safe enough with you to let you know that that was something overstepping. And you need to reflect on that and consider what you can do to change your behavior. And yes, everybody's responsible for their own feelings and stuff, but we are also responsible for how we treat people. And if someone is constantly feeling like shit around us, then yeah, that does have to do with us. And we have to consider how we're impacting that. Now, if someone feels like shit around us all the time because they're demanding ridiculous things of us that are overstepping our own boundaries and outside of our own ability, then yeah, that's not your problem. But if someone is voicing to us that, hey, I don't like when you use this kind of language with me or around me because it makes me really uncomfortable, or I don't like when you do this because it feels very controlling when you speak this way or you do these things. Like if you're making decisions and you're not including me, or I'm trying to think of more examples. Those are healthy boundaries to communicate, and those are things that you can look at and go, okay, well, I can make changes. So with that said, if you're the person setting the boundary, I wouldn't say like immediately cut someone off just because they had a negative response once in a while to a boundary being set. As long as that negative response is like reasonably negative. I'm not talking about somebody like having a full on like fight with you or being abusive in response to your boundaries, but give them a little bit of space. Be understanding. Maybe talk to them if it's like an ongoing pattern where you tell them about your feelings or things that you want to change and they respond negatively, and let them know if it's like impacting your ability to feel safe enough to even express those things to them. Remind them that the only reason why you're bringing those things up is because you feel safe enough with them and comfortable enough with them to be able to share those things with them. But they also should be there for you, because you setting a boundary, you enforcing a boundary, it's about you. And so a lot of people, their go-to will be to try to make it about them. And it's not, it's about you. You have set this boundary. You are the one that should get the apology. You are the one that should get the plan about how to fix this. And you are the one that should get the support and validation for the boundary that was just overstepped. When we're setting boundaries, we need to consider a lot of things. Make sure that you understand what a boundary is. I forget how I used to word it, but boundaries and expectations, we need to make sure are not things where we're demanding excess from someone, but instead expecting respect from the person. So, for example, I had lived with somebody where they had a slightly different sleep schedule than me, where I was actually up in the morning for once. I was up in the morning a lot and would clean the house and stuff, and then they would get up in the afternoon. And by then, I was exhausted because I spent all day cleaning and cooking and whatnot, doing errands that I had to do, and I just wanted to focus on, art and writing and everything. And that was my relaxation time. They set a boundary that living together meant I had to come out and sit with them for 2 hours every day. Um, and my boundary was that wasn't possible for me. I didn't have the spoons to do that. I tried negotiating with the person. And that negotiation was, well, it's very important to me to have this intellectual stimulation. I go into spirals if I feel like I'm wasting time. It's something I've dealt with my entire life. And yeah, that's not a boundary, that's a demand. And they worded it as a boundary. Meanwhile, I'm saying my boundary is I need space. I need my own time. And when I have the spoons and when I have the ability, I'll come out and I'll chat. Like I said, I even tried compromising with them where I was like, okay, I don't think I could do 2 hours, but maybe 1 hour where we have tea and maybe we listen to a podcast together, or let's talk about politics. Cause they were somebody that like, kept up with politics and everything too. So like, okay, let's add to this because what they wanted, what the 2 hours was, because I tried to do it a couple times. The 2 hours was sitting, having tea, and not talking. And with that said, I have had plenty of times hanging out with people where you don't talk, but you're doing things and you get to do your own thing. They would insist I sat at the table and had tea and did nothing but sat there in silence. I wasn't allowed to do any writing. I wasn't allowed to draw. I wasn't allowed to like talk about anything. I'm like, this is not something I can do. My ADHD is screaming, says Flo. Exactly. Like I was not capable of doing it. And when I tried to compromise, they would not compromise. And when I tried to express why that was a boundary for me, they argued with me about it and said I was being disrespectful to them. And started fights about it. So loving myself meant enforcing that boundary and standing up for myself and making sure that I was communicating that I could not do these things and not pushing myself to do them. I did attempt them a few times, like I said, but making sure I wasn't pushing myself to do these things that were well beyond my ability and communicating as much as I could was self-love. It was a way to take care of myself and to make sure I was getting what I needed. And reminding myself that I did not have to please this person. I did not need to make them happy. The meaning of my existence is not to be there for this person and make them happy. The meaning of my existence is to make myself happy. The meaning of life is to do the things that we love and we enjoy and to take care of ourselves. And with that said, obviously, you don't want to be completely selfish. Everything is a balance, right? Things aren't just black and white. So, take care of yourself, but don't be an asshole to other people. But yeah, it took time of like thinking and reminding myself that, okay, this thing, because they would also argue that what I was doing was overstepping boundaries and that I would have to reflect on that. And Flo and I have talked about BPD a lot. I have BPD as well. And when people do that, it really fucks with you because then you're like, well, am I misinterpreting this? Is this my own brain, making me be a bad person? And I think that I'm standing up for myself, but really I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. And there's lots of different things people could be going through that can make it really difficult when someone else is saying that you're overstepping boundaries and whatnot when you're not really. And it's really hard to sit back and break it down and go, no, wait, I wasn't in the wrong here. And it takes practice. And it takes figuring out the exercises. And if you're able to, it takes finding people you can share these things with and talk through so that they can help you kind of see what the reality of the situation might be. But when you do that, it does need to be people that you trust are able to completely review the situation. And even then, it feels like you really do need to depend on yourself, because even if you're telling someone about it, at least for me personally, like if I was relaying an event to somebody and asking them their opinion, my brain would always be like, well, I'm saying it from my side. They're not getting to hear the other person's side. So what if I am wrong? What if I am altering the reality? And part of that comes from the fact that I saw people who were abusive in my life do that as well. A thing my mom actually did was she used to go to psychiatrist, and she would tell this psychiatrist this whole delusional story. And the therapist would give her advice, and she'd follow through with it in the most toxic way possible, and use the fact that the psychiatrist told her this advice as an excuse to be abusive. And I was always scared of doing something like that myself. I didn't want to be doing something that was bad, that was, toxic, and thinking that I'm doing the right thing, thinking that I'm taking care of myself, and I'm actually, doing something really wrong to someone I care about. But yeah, it takes a lot of practice and figuring things out. And I keep repeating that because it's very important. And what a lot of people end up doing is trying a little bit, trying to reflect on things a little bit, maybe incorporating some exercises, like CBT is an example. There's worksheets and stuff online that you can use, and maybe you use that a few times and you don't feel like it's doing anything, so you give up. Maybe you try doing mantras for self-love and it doesn't work immediately, so you give up. Everything in life takes practice, and everything in life takes figuring out what works for you. So yeah, maybe the mantras or whatever aren't going to work. However, you have to give them an actual chance. Maybe setting a goal of, I'm going to do this for the next month, or breaking down to make sure that you're breaking down the moments to make sure that you're setting boundaries, you're enforcing them, and you're doing them in a healthy way. Could mean that I'm going to write down a boundary. I'm going to sit there and break down if it is a healthy boundary or if it's something I'm demanding of somebody else. Like how that person should have sat down and thought, is this actually a boundary that I'm demanding this person come out and have tea with me every day for 2 hours? If they'd sat and actually reflected on that, maybe had some kind of friend to mediate that on, where they actually outline what is part of that expectation. Like, okay, so I'm asking them to come out for tea for 2 hours. What is involved in those 2 hours? What on this person's side are their boundaries? What are they capable of? And what might I be overstepping here? All of the things, write down all of the things that need to be into consideration, and really reflect on it, and then decide from there. And have faith in yourself that you're doing what's best for you. And part of that confidence and faith in yourself will come from taking the time and being slow with it. If we are actually acting out of intense emotions, then reflecting on something every day for a couple weeks and writing down our thoughts and breaking it down, we'll make sure that it's not just an intense emotion that's causing us to feel like we need to do this thing, right? So if you're if you come up with a boundary and you're not too sure if it's actually a boundary that you want to have. So, I'm trying to think of one. If I were to sit down after I went to that party and decide I'm going to set boundaries, which, I got invited to a party. I got asked to come to one because the person really wanted me to come to it and they wanted the support from me. And if I sat down and said, I'm going to do a boundary where I don't go to fucking parties anymore, that might be one that I need to reflect on because where does that feeling come from? Does that come from actually not wanting to go to parties anymore? Or does that come from me not voicing to somebody that, hey, if I'm going to go to a party, I can only go if there's somebody else going that I'm going to be comfortable with. And if that person doesn't show up, I can't go. I'm sorry. That would have been a more realistic boundary than like, I'm never going to a party again. Because that seems more like I'm isolating myself and not looking at what the real problem was there. Because, like we discussed, it's when you go to a party and you're friends with the host and not friends with anybody else, it can be really difficult. So, yeah, reflecting on your boundaries, making sure they're not things you're using for excuses to be toxic to others or be toxic to yourself, like the party one would be. And reflecting on if people are, respecting those boundaries. Because if I set that boundary, if I decided, okay, I'm not going to get rid of it's not going to be that I never go to a party again. I'm going to go to parties again if I feel up to it. However, this is going to be the rule, and you have to communicate to that person too so they understand. Let them know it's a boundary. So my boundary is I cannot go to parties unless I have these things in place. Otherwise, I'm very sorry, but I can't go. And then they should respect those boundaries. And yeah, Flo mentioned like the boundary about the coming out for tea for 2 hours is a demand. I tried to talk to some people about that because that's something I encountered a few times where I would set boundaries, and my boundaries are don't do this thing to me. Don't do this thing around me. Don't expect this thing of me. And then they would set boundaries, which were, well, you have to do this. Well, you have to do this. And those are different things. That's not really a boundary, right? I mean, again, things aren't black and white, so there can be things that kind of cross over. So maybe a boundary is that if you have somebody that's a partner, they need to be able to listen to your feelings, and that's just important for any relationship. And that is something that maybe needs a bit of compromise. So maybe you guys have one day a week or one day a month that you sit down and you go through the things that you need to discuss. And maybe their boundary is that they don't want to talk about feelings because it takes all of their spoons for the day. And yeah, so plan it around, okay, well, I need to be able to share my feelings with you. You need to be able to not feel like they're going to come up randomly throughout the day, or else it exhausts you because your anxiety and stuff. So how about every Friday we sit down, we talk about our feelings, we do so in a healthy way, and then let's follow it up with a movie date or something, so that everybody can feel good and we can get back to those feelings, right? So that's creating a healthy relationship with someone and respecting both people's boundaries. It can be difficult because with how much people are starting to understand more about mental health and more about taking care of yourself and boundaries and things, people are also using that to control others and using it in an abusive way. Yes, Flo, boundaries with yourself. 1 second. Sorry, my nose was running. Boundaries with yourself is very important and definitely part of self love. Not letting yourself overstep boundaries that you set for yourself. I think I mentioned something similar. I mentioned earlier was just, you know, not pushing yourself beyond what you're capable of. I think I worded it more in a sense of like when people have expectations of yourself of you, you don't push yourself beyond that to meet their expectations, and instead you need to consider what you need to do for yourself, but also setting some boundaries for yourself in general. Blind Bard said, "I'm terrible at setting boundaries because of my parents." Yeah, parents are often one of the traumatizing catalysts for us not being able to talk about feelings and boundaries. Excuse me. Because parents, especially in our generation, I think, had that whole mindset of you don't get to have boundaries because you're my child and you're in my house. I used to get that a lot. And then it fucks you up as an adult. Yeah, your parents raised you to not have boundaries. Yeah, they teach you that you don't get to have them. And then it fucks us up as an adult, and we think that when we're in relationships or have friendships that we shouldn't have boundaries, and that's what real connection means, is that there's no boundaries, which means we end up being involved with people that walk all over us or mistreat us or don't respect what would be our boundaries that we're now ignoring. But Flo, you have any examples of self-boundaries? Boundaries we set, just personal for us to respect about ourselves. I'm gonna switch this to switch the camera off for 1 second so I can blow my nose. All right, so oh, Blind Bard mentioned that ads played. Well, I forgot to pay attention to that. The stupid ads coming up while I'm talking. So there's ads going right now, so we'll wait a second and then we'll keep talking. I actually meant to keep an eye on that because I forgot that it tells me when there's ads. Well, thankfully, we haven't had a huge turnout tonight anyway, so there wasn't a lot of people missing out on what I was saying anyways. I think 12 seconds left. Okay. So we're back after the ads. Yeah, so Blind Bard, I was just mentioning that parents fuck us up for boundaries because they tend to come at it with a mindset of you're in my house and you're my kid, so you don't get boundaries with me. And then in the future, when we have friends or loved ones, or we're in relationships in general, we think that that means that we don't have boundaries when we're with those people. Oh, thank you for the follow. Type of business. uh, so we learn that we shouldn't have boundaries with people that we care about when it's actually the complete opposite. That in order to feel closer to someone, we should, in order to feel the closest with somebody, we need to have boundaries. You're not going to be able to actually have a close relationship with someone if you don't have boundaries. You'll never feel fully safe with them, and you'll never feel like you can really be yourself. And we asked Flo about self boundaries, and Faye said no murders on Thursdays, right? Because, like, so self boundary of no murders on Thursdays. If if you have things that make that bad for you, like maybe doing a certain thing on a Thursday, for example, means that you won't have enough energy for what you need to do on Friday, or you've noticed that it's really bad for your mental health when you do that. Setting that boundary will help make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and making sure you keep up with that boundary. And it can give you a sense of pride too when you set self boundaries, like you're not going to do something on a certain day or whatever, is ensuring. My hair is looking like a fucking eldritch god in the background here. Sorry. Setting those boundaries can make sure it gives you a chance to feel proud about keeping up with those, right? And while also being good for yourself. So I have a boundary of not making self-deprecating jokes about myself because I know they make me feel worse. I don't always live up to it. I slip from time to time, but it's much rarer than it used to be. I try to switch to self-aggrandizing jokes, which are good for me. Yeah, I'm bad for making both kinds of jokes. I will, in pretty much the same breath, talk about how amazing I am, and then switch up to self-deprecating. I actually remember when I worked at the funeral home, somebody was collecting trash, and I was just like, I made a joke about me being trash, and the looks I got, because it was not the audience. For me, it doesn't always make me feel worse about myself with the jokes. It actually makes me feel a little bit better. So I guess it's a person to person kind of thing. Like if you're doing things and it makes you feel bad about yourself when you do that, then that is a really good self boundary. So taking taking the time to be like, okay, well, I did this thing. It made me feel worse about myself, and it actually reinforced these negative feelings I have about myself. So I'm going to make the effort to remove that from my life. That's a very good thing. I have no problem calling myself trash because I am queen of the raccoons. Do my bidding, my furry subjects. Yeah. Well, part of I mean, I joke about being trash and stuff, and part of that is I've always been kind of grunge leaning in my personality and my style and stuff like that. So I actually remember I remember an encounter I had with somebody in high school where like this girl came up to me and was like, this other girl, and like points to essentially like a cheerleader and was like, she just said that you're a dirtbag. And I'm like, yeah, I am. So, and yeah, raccoons are amazing. Hmm. And I guess that can go under self love too. Is I am perfectly happy with who I am, and when other people try to insult me for being who I am, it's not an insult. It's you're attempting to insult me by just commenting on who I am, and that doesn't make sense to me how that's an insult. That's like because of my current full-time work, people will try and insult me. Um, and the insults don't even make sense. Like the ones that try to say, what's that line everybody tries to use? OF detected, opinion rejected. Meanwhile, most of the people that I know who have spicy sites and stuff are some of the most intelligent people that I've talked to. Um, and I think I'm pretty smart. Um, my whole thing is that, I talk about mental health and I love art and I'm always talking about philosophy and stuff like that. It's not it's not an insult for me to be me and me to be happy with who I am and comfortable with who I am. But it really shows what type of person they are that they think that's an insult. So yeah, probably close to the end for today, for the chat anyways. Um, got a little bit longer to go. But so today we talked about self-love. Oh, I had someone who commented on one of my pictures once, you look like a transgender. And I was like, yes, thank you. Right? Um, they think it's some kind of insult to say that you are things. That's like when people call me fat and I'm like, yeah. And like, what am I gonna like? You're gonna be like, hey, you're fat. And I'm gonna be like, what? I am? When did that happen? It's like, yeah, I am quite thick and I make a living actually off of my image and stuff too. So that's not really that's a thing too with the fat thing. It's often comments underneath like spicy posts and stuff where I have like 100 likes and a bunch of people thirsting after me, and then this one person is like, "Well, you're fat." Okay, and right? I am squishy. I am fun to cuddle. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, with that said, I do want to kind of like tone myself. Um I haven't been doing my yoga and my exercises, although it's really hard for me to exercise with my POTS. Um but I'm never going to be like skinny. Um and I am perfectly fine with that. I like being thick. I just want to exercise to kind of like have myself more into the shape I want, and also like to be easier on my uh like my symptoms for my disabilities. Yeah, and that's fine. Thick is good. Thick is good. Skinny is good. Whatever people's bodies are is good, because what is important is that you're comfortable in your body. And it doesn't, again, self love. It's about loving your body. Loving my body was something that I struggled with for a while too, because dealing with, I grew up with my parents calling me fat. And that was coming from my mom, who was like about 450 to 500 pounds. And so I think a lot of that was like internalized fat phobia that she was projecting onto me. And then my dad hated that she had gained weight. I believe that was quoted in their divorce papers, that he felt unattracted to her because of the weight she gained. And so they both used to call me fat when I was younger. And that really fucked me up and made me think that I had to be thin for people to um, be attracted to me or even give a shit about me. And it doesn't help that doctors also tend to fall into that, because if you are overweight in any way, if you are vegan, um, there's a few other in the list. There's a few things that if you are any of these things and you go to a doctor, you will get gaslit. You will get told, which includes just being a woman too. If you go to a doctor, they will tell you, well, this is just because of this. So, I got told a lot of things were because of my weight or because I was vegan, when they weren't, and had to battle doctors a lot so that I could get actual assistance with my disabilities and stuff that they weren't offering, because they're like, well, just lose weight. So you mean you, like, we just talked about how I possibly have this illness that makes it really difficult to lose weight, if not impossible to lose weight. And you're telling me that in order to help me with it, I have to first lose weight. Yep. Oh, okay. It's, uh, yeah. But loving your body can be very difficult. Um, I also grew up with the dysphoria or whatever of being very confused with my identity, which included, I love being feminine. I love my curves and I love my breasts. But then sometimes I don't. Sometimes I say it often to people, actually, that I wish I could just detach this when I wanted. And went through the whole, once in a while binding with like tensor bandages and shit like that. And having dreams that I had different genitals, where I felt more comfortable with that, but then also don't actually want to permanently have different genitals. I want to be able to switch between them. And it was difficult to love my own body. I love my titties so much I put a ring on them. And you got a prescription. That's good. Good stuff. I am a lot happier with my body, and it took a lot of work, a lot of discovering myself and who I am, a lot of discovering what made me feel good, and also grieving what I can't change about my body. So realizing and embracing that I don't have to be skinny and that I look quite good thick. um, and then also allowing myself to actually grieve that I don't get to be skinny, because, I always wanted to be skinny with the flat stomach and stuff, and I'm not going to get to be. And that's okay for me to kind of grieve that. And I can embrace that I do look good and everybody looks good. And part of how I got through hating how thick my body was looking at there's lots of people that are thick that I think look absolutely amazing, and they're super sexy or super good looking, and I'd be like, well, I think they're good looking and they're like the same weight as me, or possibly even bigger. So why can't I think that of myself? Ah, yeah, you wish you were a small, chubby girl. Height was another thing that I dealt with, and I'm in an uncomfortable height range because I got made fun of for being so tall, for being a tall girl, and but also like when I realized that I was into women and started like dating women and being around women that way romantically. Being tall was very attractive to them, which was nice. But being 5'11", I'm too tall. Like I'm too tall for the people who are just like, oh, women aren't supposed to be that tall. They're supposed to be little things or whatever. But I'm also considered short to the people who are into tall people. So like I don't fit into either one. Um, because I'm under 6 feet tall or whatever. I'm not the, tall goddess. Um, I'm actually considered short among those people. But then also, I'm like taller than most men. Oh, we're the same height, kind of. How tall are you? Shrunk on HRT went from 5'11" to 5'10". So I'm a little bit taller than you. So yeah, my height is a sensitive thing for me. And I've actually had to deal with that where people comment on my height and I have to remind myself I'm comfortable with how tall I am. Um, and it's not something I can change. To an extent, I have big goth boots that can help make me taller. So, um, I like wearing those. Um, but yeah, just allowing myself to love me for me. Um, because maybe it's nice that I'm in the middle, because maybe it's nice that I'm taller than most men and get to be intimidating that way, but I also can be short and more feminine. I get to be the in between. And even though it feels like a disadvantage and it feels like something that's not so good, it's actually something really nice because I get to be the in between. All right, so we're probably going to wrap up today. So we'll just quickly go over what we talked about today. So, um, oh, wait a minute. Blind Bart, I'm skinny, but it makes me feel emaciated. Yeah, that's a thing. There's the opposite. There's the two ends, right? Like, because, like I was mentioning, skinny bodies are beautiful too. Um, that doesn't just mean the skinny as in like skinny, but like has a bit of muscle and stuff. Um, I think that's something that gets ignored a lot. And um, there's this unfortunate thing that happened with body positivity where people think that part of body positivity is that they're going to say that thicker bodies are better than thinner bodies, and that's not the case. All bodies are good. All bodies are beautiful. Um, and so, you know, people will claim to be body positive and because they support thicker people, but then they'll go under someone who's skinny's post and say eat a sandwich or something like that. And that's just as bad. All bodies are beautiful, and there's plenty of people who, um, just like there's thicker people like me and Flo who, no matter how much we tried, we wouldn't be able to be skinny. Um, there's people who are skinny who, no matter how much they tried, wouldn't be able to be thicker. Um, wouldn't be able to fit into that like societal norm or whatever the beauty standard. And that's fine. Everybody's body is different. Everybody looks amazing, and you're all hot. And I'm pan, so I can say that you are all hot. And Starter, you might join in co-op, but just quieter than usual. Um, that would be nice. Don't feel pressured. Um, but I'll start it up in co-op so that you can join. Uh, Mythical Pan, a pleasure to meet you. Part of why I choose to identify as Pan is because of Pan, because I love Pan. Um, One of my favorite mythical beings. Um, I'm probably maybe gonna start Stardew a little bit late today. We'll see because I want to have a snack. um, yeah, I'm a pan with pots. I also like the alliteration because I'm Polly. Um, so being Polly, a Polly pan person is pleasing to say. Um, and it just so happens that my disability lines up with that too. So Polly pan with pots. All right, so I'll try to wrap up again. um, so today we talked about self love and we talked about different ways to provide self love. So, to give yourself self love, it can look like having special dates where you do special things for yourself and make yourself feel good and set yourself up with a date that you would give somebody else that you loved, and instead you give that love to yourself. And self love can also look like setting self boundaries, as well as other kinds of boundaries with other people and enforcing them, making sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're not letting people, including yourself, overstep those boundaries, because those are important to take care of yourself. Also, reminding yourself of the things that you do love about yourself and remembering to make those lists of those good things when you feel good and not when you feel bad, so that you don't think that there's nothing. Write down all your achievements, write down the things you love about yourself, write down the things you've done that you love. And if you're looking at that list when you're not feeling particularly good about yourself, remind yourself that even now, if you're trying to argue that it wasn't as good as you thought, you at one point when you felt good thought that was great and were proud of yourself. And it is just your negative thoughts trying to fight you. And self love takes a lot of work. And we have to work really hard at being able to love ourselves and take care of ourselves, but it is very much worth it in the end. And it allows us to be there for other people and allows us to live a much happier life. Self love can also include, loving your body, loving your mind, accepting yourself for who you are, and accepting that that's okay, allowing yourself to grieve the things that you can't be, and loving yourself for being exactly who you are. Reminding yourself that you have worth as a person without having to involve other people. Other people do not decide your self worth. You are worthy, and you can love yourself. And it can be very difficult to separate those things. We are raised, we are conditioned to believe that our worth comes from how others see us, and that is not the case. You are very worthy, and you need to love yourself and remind yourself that all that matters is that you are living a happy life and that you are taking care of yourself and that you are happy with the things you are doing. And also, the negative thoughts are going to pop in and be like, well, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. Then make any changes that you need to do. Make a plan. Set yourself up for success. Or maybe reflect on you thinking that, hey, I'm not doing the things that I want to do. And actually think if those are realistic. Because you should be setting realistic goals. Smart goals, as they say. They need to be achievable, and they need to be things that are reasonable, and they need to be things that actually matter to you. So make sure that you're setting the right goals and not setting things that are well beyond what you could possibly do, and then making yourself feel bad for not achieving these goals that you couldn't have achieved. It's fine if you cannot achieve things in the same span of time or energy that other people can. We are all different. And accepting what we're capable of will change your life. So, maybe you want to get a book written, and other people are writing books in a couple months. Your writing is different. Your writing is completely different than that person's, and your ability to write is completely different. And your writing process is completely different. So if it takes you 20 years to write something that's the same length as something somebody wrote in a few months, that is perfectly fine. That is still a great achievement. There are many people who won't get to write books, and you managed to get it. So maybe instead of setting that goal of, hey, I want a book written by the end of the year, set a goal of, I want the outline done by the end of the year. And that will be a huge achievement. I'm trying to think of other examples of achievements that you can, like goals you can set for yourself. Yeah. So I guess we'll end for today because I have to run to the bathroom and I have to get ready for Stardew and possibly have a little snack. So thank you everybody who joined me. Thank you Flo, and thank you Blind Bard. Stardew Valley is supposed to commence in about half an hour, but might be a tiny bit late depending. So I'll see everybody there. Bye.